Have you ever been lost? Like legit lost? I've never been really, really lost. There was a time a few years ago that I was hunting down along the Buffalo River, and for a while I didn't know where I was. And it took me a little bit to get my bearings, and I walked for a while, and then I found something that was familiar, and I wandered back out again. But it's a really vulnerable feeling. And I did have an experience that I know I shared this story with you all before, but I'll share it again here, that it was a really weird feeling to be lost and had no idea that I was. Like, no idea that I had been lost. As soon as I found out that the whole time I didn't know where I was, it was a weird feeling. I'll tell you the story. I was out riding on my four-wheeler on some land that we were allowed to hunt. It wasn't like a ton of land, maybe 450 acres, something like that. So it was big, but it wasn't like Buffalo, wilderness area big. And I rode my four-wheeler over to the fence by the woods, jumped off my four-wheeler, and I was just going to go exploring for a little bit, find good places to hunt and whatnot. So I jumped across the fence and went into the woods and started walking. I went down a little ravine, crossed a creek, just headed back up in, went across some fields, kept on going for a while. And I was walking for maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours tops. Excuse me. And I was about ready to turn around. I thought it's about time to go back. And I saw this field up ahead. And I thought, well, I'm just going to check this field out and see if there'd be any good places to hunt or anything set a stand up along there. So I got up to the field across the fence, and I looked over and I was like, oh, there's a four-wheeler there. That's someone else's four-wheeler. And then I was like, hang on a second. That's my four-wheeler. And I started recognizing some of the landmarks that I was seeing when I was going through the field. And here is what happened. And I couldn't have planned this if I had tried to. I had wandered for about 2 hours in a perfect circle, all the way through the woods, across the creek, down the ravine, and wandered right back around within 10 feet of where I started, and I had no idea that I was lost the whole time. And it was a weird feeling knowing that all along there, I didn't know where I was going, but I ended up right back where I wanted to be. Seldom in life does that happen. Most of the time when we are in a situation and we think, how did we get here? We don't wander into good situations by mistake. We don't wander exactly to where we want to be just by mistake. You don't happen there. You don't happen to get where you want to be by mistake. It takes intent. You find a direction and you go there. We used to, years back as well, me and my buddy Brad, we'd get on our four-wheelers and we'd head out Boat Mountain Road. And we just go back Newton County Line Road, and we just get lost back in there with our four-wheelers, just driving all over the place. And you end up somewhere. This is before phones. It's hard to get lost anymore because you can just, put it in your Maps app and figure out exactly where you're at. But we'd drive, man, and we'd drive and drive and drive, and we would end up somewhere, and we were like, what? We had no idea that this road ended up here. Just interesting to see you get yourself lost and then see where you ended up at. But most of the time, when we find ourselves in a situation or something doesn't work out well, or we find ourselves in a less than ideal situation, oftentimes this thought goes through our minds, I should have seen this coming. I should have seen this coming. I should have seen that this wasn't going to end well. Or sometimes the thing that's even worse to hear is when someone else says, you should have seen this coming. We've probably all watched a movie, bad guy in the closet, kids walking towards the closet, and he may have a weapon or something, and you're watching it happen, and you're saying, no, don't go to the closet, don't go to the closet, don't open the door, no. You see it happening. And you see what can happen, you see what can transpire, and you don't want it to happen. Maybe you've seen the videos on YouTube of like slippery, icy roads, and the cars are sliding down the hill, and they're going towards the bottom, and there's like a busy road, and they're sliding, and you're watching it happen. and it's like it's a slow motion wreck, and it's going, you know exactly what's going to happen. You see it happening while it's happening, and you say, no, don't go there, don't go there. And it goes down, and there's a wreck. You may have seen the video as well. There's a video of an 18-wheeler that the driver is fighting sleep, and he's going down the road, and he's got a dash cam, and the camera shows the front where he's going, and it also shows him. So you have a view out the front, and it shows him, and you see him starting to fight sleep. And you're thinking, dude, pull off. Like you're tired, pull off. You know exactly what's going to happen. So he starts to drift off, and the semi drifts over. You can see the camera out front. It goes over to the rumble strips on the side of the road, and he kind of wakes up and pulls the 18-wheeler back on the road. And then he starts to drift off, and he goes over this way, and he wakes up, and he comes back on, and you know what's happening. You know exactly what's going to happen. And up ahead, you see the road's going to turn, and you know that on the left side of the road, there's no rumble strips, and this road is turning sharp enough to the right that he's not going to be able to get back on the road. And sure enough, he goes straight off the road, and he wakes up, and he's trying to fight his semi back on the road, and he's turning, and all of a sudden you can see in the dash cam his semi flips over on its side, and the last view that you get is this splintered windshield, and you see the guy back upside down in his sleeper in the back, and there's no surprise. You saw it coming. Like you knew exactly what was going to happen. And oftentimes, there's times in our lives where we're going somewhere, or someone else that we love is going somewhere, and we see that this isn't going to end well. We see it happening. And what this message was kind of born out of was the other night, I'm sure most of you know, the guys, when we were here on Thursday evening, we did a SWOT report. That SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And one of the things that we figured out that we're kind of weak in is actually being authentic with each other and speaking into each other's lives. When there's something in someone else's life that you're not sure about, chatting with them on it, calling them on the carpet about it, saying, hey, what are you doing? This may not end up the way that you want to end up. What I want to share with you this Sunday and next Sunday, I want to look at what does it take for us to be the kind of people that allow each other that allows someone else to speak into our lives, and what is the kind of person that has the boldness to speak into someone else's life. So I want to speak on that next Sunday. This Sunday, I want to set up and give us a little bit of a kind of a lay down some track to get to that point. So most of the times, when we're in these situations, when we find ourselves in a situation that we want to get out of, we look for a fix. So we didn't know where we were going. We weren't intentional about something. We wandered down the wrong road financially or in a relationship or whatever it's like in my marriage. And all of a sudden I find myself in a situation, and what I want is a fix. I want a solution. And so I'm going to give you some bad news right now, and then I'm going to give you some good news later on. But the bad news is most of the problems in your life can't be fixed. Like there's no fix. There's no solution. Like all across the nation, probably all around the world right now, there's people that go to a financial advisor and they say, hey, we're in a bad situation. I need a solution. I need you to fix this. Or they go to their pastor or to a counselor, and their relationship, their marriage, our family is in a mess. I want this to be fixed. And a good counselor, a good advisor knows you don't just fix something, right? You fix a washer. You fix a squeaky door. You shoot some grease on the hinges and it stops. You fix a computer. Like you do a hard restart where you push the button, you hold it in until everything shuts down. You count to like 10 seconds, right? You push that button again, it fires back up and the flickering screen goes away. Or that annoying little prompt that makes you try to sign into Microsoft Teams 100 times and you try to sign in, it doesn't work, it's gone. It's just gone. And our lives aren't that way. We were not designed, by God, we were not designed just to be fixed. We were not designed for there to be this silver bullet, this solution that we can suddenly change something up, and all of a sudden our whole life is different. A good counselor, a good advisor knows that the same thing that gets you into something is what gets you back out again, most times. What got you there was a life lived in a certain direction. What will get you out of that situation is living your way out of that situation, going in a different direction. You get to where you want to be the same way you got to where you don't want to be, except it's just the exact opposite, right? You live in a different direction. There's a principle that I want to share with you. I'm just going to write it down here, and I want to leave it here for the rest of my message. And it's called the principle of the way. Principle of the way. And this is what it is. Direction determines destination. The principle of the way, this has been called a bunch of different things, principle of the path, principle of the highway. The principle of the way is your direction determines your destination. So before I talk about the actual principle, I want to tell you what a principle is. A principle is something that it's a little different than a law or a rule. You can't really break a principle. You can't really follow it. It's something that kind of follows you around. And if you don't observe it, there's repercussions for it. So there's a bunch of different principles. So one of them is the principle of buoyancy. So the thing that makes so that the same principle that makes so a little rock, a pebble, a half of an ounce won't float, but a humongous cruise ship will. Karen and I had the opportunity this past year to go on a cruise, and the name of the ship was the Oasis of the Seas, and it's huge. It is huge. On this ship, there is a outdoor amphitheater, and they do a diving show there. They have a big pool, and they do a high dive, like a diving show, on this ship. There is a outdoor promenade, and I would say it's probably 8 stories, maybe 10 stories high, that you can walk along, where there's shops on either side, and you can see all the way out the top, and there's a zip line that goes across the top. It's far out. On the ship, there's something, it's called Central Park. There's living trees, like trees and shrubs, and a sidewalk that kind of meanders through there. It's fantastic. The ship is huge. And the principle of buoyancy says that the same principle that makes that little half an ounce pebble sink makes the Oasis of the Seas float. And the ship, I've got some numbers here, it weighs 225,282 tons. 225,000 tons, that's 450,560,000 pounds. That is super heavy. But the way that you could make that float is follow this principle. If you don't follow that principle, it's not going to float. So like let's say your buddy calls you up and you go over there, he's like, man, I built a boat and I cannot get this thing to float. I can't get it to float. And you go over there and it's this boat is made out of rock. Like, he took this rock and he chiseled out, and it's super cool looking. He's like, it doesn't float. I can't get this thing to float. And you say, man, it's made out of rock. Like, it doesn't float. There's a principle here. Rock's not going to float. He says, well, what if we chisel the hole and we make it look a little more cool, a little more streamlined? And you can tell him, you can do anything you want, but the ship's not going to float. There's a principle that you must live by. And I this past season of my life, I had the opportunity to walk with a friend, and I'm sure all of you, most of you, have had this opportunity as well. I had the opportunity to walk beside a friend that was in a really difficult time of his life, and he is a godly man. And the whole time, the things that he was going through, the situation was so evident to me. And he would say, man, we're going to work on this. We're going to do some of this. These are some things that we're going to do better. And I would tell Karen, it's rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. This ship's going down. There are principles in place that if you should choose to ignore this, it's not going to happen. Like the verse that says, husbands, love your wives, that your prayers be not hindered. It's a principle. So if we're not loving our wives, we can dig into all types of techniques and all of this. But God's promise is if you're not loving your wife, something's going to cut your prayers off. So I had the opportunity to walk with this man. And sure enough, like the boat sank. He ended up where one day he called me up and he said, man, like I'm done. This boat has sunk. And to me, I'm like, it didn't just sink all of a sudden. It's been sinking for 2 years. Like this is, you watch these things happen. It's like a slow motion train wreck. You've seen people like this where they're making decisions in their life or they're just starting to make decisions and you know where it ends. What I want us to be is when we see people in those types of situations, we don't just let it happen. We don't just let it happen. You don't watch people kids wander towards a busy street and say, well, they're going to learn if they get out on that busy street. We'll just see what happens. They'll learn. Like, no, there's something inside of you that says, no, we can't. We can't do this. Do they not know that where they're headed doesn't end well? The destination that you're heading to isn't a place that you want to go, but on the way there, these kids don't know that they're heading somewhere dangerous. They're having as much fun as if they would be walking anywhere. When I was wandering through the woods, no idea that I was lost. I was having just as much fun. I mean, there was no difference. There was no difference to me whether I was lost or whether I wasn't. I didn't know that I was lost. So Jesus speaks to this. Jesus speaks to this principle. Direction determines destination. He speaks to this. And I want to jump into this. There's another. I have had the opportunity with the financial work that I do. I often do a search on what Dave Ramsey says about some things. And Dave Ramsey is about as straightforward in what it means to live your way out of a mess as it's possible to be. So the other day I was listening and there's a guy who he was in debt $450,000 in student loans. And the thing that was so bad was he failed the test, or he failed some really crucial tests right at the end. And so they kicked him out of whatever school or whatever you get kicked out of, which means he'll never be a doctor. So he has $450,000 worth of medical tests, and he can never get the degree that he was paying for the schooling, so he could take this test so he could become a doctor. And in the meantime, he'd gotten a sweet car and he was making payments and all this kind of stuff. And Dave Ramsey told him, like, do you know why you're in this position? Because you're living like an idiot. You're going to get rid of this stupid car. You're not going to see the inside of a restaurant for like years, and ramen noodles is going to be your best friend. And he went off to this guy, and he understood this principle, that what got this guy in that place is the same thing that was going to get him out. He lived his way there. A change of direction is what was needed to live his way back out. So I've read this passage to you in Matthew 7. I'm going to read it through quickly, and I'm going to use it for a launching pad to go to where our text is, which is in Proverbs. So I'm going to read Matthew 7, and I'm going to start in verse 24. This is in the Sermon on the Mount. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine, I'm reading in the NIV this time, anyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice will immediately find themselves out of all their tight spots. That's not what it says. Listen to what it says. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Everyone who hears these words and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. So compare that. So let's say you hear Jesus' words and you start doing them. Compare that with a man who builds a house. Delayed gratification. It's going to be a while till he gets the satisfaction of seeing a house. There's a process. It takes time. It takes discipline. Like, you're staying involved in this. It's a long time until you get the satisfaction of that house being built. He is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. So what makes this man wise? And I think something that's fairly close to the surface here is this wise man realizes that life is connected. The way that I'm building now, the way that I'm living now, impacts the way that I live later. The wise man understands that life is connected. What I do today is connected to the future. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the rock, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on a rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. So where the rock was the slow way, it's the hard way, it's the I'm not going to take any shortcuts way, it's the I'm going to delay gratification right now because I am not going to sacrifice the ultimate for what's immediate. I want something right now, but I have a place that I want to get to. That's the wise man building on the rock. The foolish man is just the opposite. He doesn't want to delay gratification. He wants the satisfaction of seeing his house built right now. And Jesus says that the rain came, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a crash. And the message here is that there's no fix for this. So the stream's coming up and the house starts to fall. There's no quick fix. The way that you fix this is you rebuild. You rebuild the house. There's not oh wow, I didn't build this. How can we shore this up? How can we strap this thing together to keep it there? What's the quick fix? This story says there is no quick fix. There isn't a quick fix. The guy who took the shortcut had a house that fell around him when the storms came. It says when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. And I'm not exactly sure what this means, but one of the things I think it could mean is they listened to this teaching and they were like, wow, here's some teaching that has handles to it. This isn't abstract. I can understand it. Like what I say is it's portable. You can take this teaching and go. They were amazed at the practicality of this teaching. So the foolish man, as opposed to the wise man here, doesn't live like life's connected. The things that I do today they're not directly connected to what happens tomorrow. So I can make some decisions, I can do some things today, but when the time comes, we're going to quickly shore it up and we're going to do things right. So I intend to, and that's going to happen someday. It's just not going to happen right now. So, I want to turn to Proverbs 7. You can turn along with me here if you want to. Proverbs 7. And this was written about 900 BC, I believe. And this is written by Solomon. And Solomon had a lot of wisdom. Wisest man that ever lived. Towards the end of his life, it seems like he had a hard time actually putting to practice some of his wisdom. He made some pretty dumb decisions. But it's kind of like a parable. I don't think it's a real story. It's told like a parable. Proverbs 7, and we're going to start in verse 6. At the window of my house, I looked down through the lattice. I saw among the simple. I noticed among the young men a youth who had no sense. He was going down the street near her corner. You don't even have to say what her or what is all wrapped up in that right away. You know what's going on, and the people that Solomon was talking to would have known as well. walking along in the direction or the way, there's our word, walking along in the direction of her house at twilight, as the day was fading, as the dark of night set in. Then came a woman to meet him, dressed like a prostitute and with crafty intent. She is unruly and defiant. Her feet never stay at home. Now in the street, now in the squares, at every corner she lurks. She took a hold of him and kissed him with a brazen face. She said, "Today I fulfilled my vows, and I have food from my fellowship offering at home." And we're not thinking, oh, wow, she's really coming on to him. I'm not exactly sure what that means. But this meant something to this guy. Maybe to her she was saying, I fulfilled my vows, I have food from my fellowship offering. Whether that was something she did at the temple, there says, hey, I have emptied out my sin bucket. Let's fill it back up again. So I came out to meet you. I looked for you and have found you. Like, you're special. And the music that is playing in this guy's ears, in his mind, is probably different than the music that's playing in Solomon's mind as he's watching this train wreck happen. Like, this guy, his heart's starting to beat a little bit faster, and the music is a little more up tempo. And Solomon is hearing this draconian Nightmare on Elm Street type music. He knows exactly where this is going. This guy is feeling special, like I'm one in a million, and Solomon is saying, you're not one in a million, you're one of a million, that you're not special in this situation. This lady would be doing this to anyone that comes along. So I came out to meet you. I have looked for you, and I have found you. I have covered my bed with the colored linens from Egypt. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let's drink deeply of love till morning. Let's enjoy ourselves with love. My husband is not home. He is gone on a long journey. He took his purse. And right there, you may be thinking, oh, maybe that's why she's out on the street. She has a husband who has a purse. But what this actually means is it's a money bag. He has went on a long trip, and he has filled his bag up with money. He's not coming back for a long time. And what she's telling him is there's going to be no consequences for this. You can just step in here, step right out, and go on the same direction that you've been going. There's going to be no consequences for this. It's just a thing. It's just like one little decision that I'm going to make, that you're going to make, and you're going to step back out and keep going on your way. No one is going to know. Solomon doesn't see it that way. It says, he took his purse, this lady's husband, filled with money, and will not be home till full moon. With persuasive words, she led him astray. She seduced him with her smooth talk, and it gives the feeling of he's thinking, he's not quite sure. And then verse 22 says, all at once he followed her. And to him, his heart's probably beating fast. This is exciting. He feels special. This lady talked to him like maybe he hasn't been talked to much, and she just seduced him to go with her. But to Solomon, it wasn't exciting. Listen to what he says next. All at once he followed her, like an ox going to slaughter. Like, whoa, hang on. Like, what this guy doing is not good. Like, we're going to admit that freely. But an ox going to slaughter? Like, he's going to get his throat slit or something? Like, are you being a little dramatic here, Solomon? But he's not done. Like a deer stepping into a noose till an arrow pierces his liver. Like, this guy's not going to die. This is just one little sin, this thing he's stepping into, and he's going to step out and he's going to go on his way. Like a bird darting into a snare, little knowing it will cost him his life. What's Solomon seeing here? Then he steps out of the parable and he talks to these group of men, boys, whoever he's talking to. Now then, my sons, listen to me. Pay attention to what I say. Do not let your heart turn to her ways. Like, my heart's not turning to her ways. This is just me deciding to do this thing. This is not me. That's not who I am. This is just this one little thing that I'm doing. I'm going to get back on my way. And Solomon says, no. That's not the way it works. Or stray into her paths. Many are the victims she has brought down. Her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is a highway. Like, whoa. Her house is a house. Like, I'm just going there. I'm going to come back out. I'm going to go on my way. And even in our situation, what this guy's doing, we would take pretty serious. But this highway is pretty strong language that says it's not just a place that you're going, it's a way that you're going down. It is a direction that is determining a destination. It's not just a thing that you step in and that you're stepping in to do and that you're stepping back out again. Her house is a highway to the grave, leading down to the chamber of death. This guy's intention wasn't to die. Like, sure, he's messing up a little bit. He's not making the wisest decision, but his intention wasn't to like choose a highway. And it's so easy to be like that. Like the decisions that we make, like, so this is, let's just say this is maybe farther than what we're going to go. We're not going to go to a prostitute's house. But I get this picture, this mental picture. There's this game called Sorry that I hate with all of my heart. For a while, Karen and I played it until mature me, I got too mad and we had to quit because I'm like just about there. And she likes to play with all the cards in her hand. And so you wait until you're almost around and then she's like, sorry's you. And I'm like, no, can't handle it. But in the game Sorry, there are these places where you land on this square, but when you land on the square, you slide. So it's not just that little square you're landing on, it slides you in the direction that you're going. What if we would look at the things that we do as that? What if we would look at the direction that what we are doing is heading more than our intention? What if we would analyze the things that we do as a path rather than just something that we step into? I know, so for most of us, we would say, I have the intention of connecting well with my wife. Like, I want her to know that I want to help her with stuff. Like, we want to be that. But there's a disconnect between the direction that we go and our intention sometimes. So we intend to have whatever it is, but we end up a different place. Like, we want to spend time with our family, but somehow we just like to work all the time. Or we intend to spend time and connect with our wives, but somehow we end up on the couch on our phone. Like, that's our intent. So I'm going to add something here. So I'm going to put a little indent there. I'm going to put direction, not intention. When you hear something, and Jesus talks about not just being a hearer, when you hear something, it gives you this intent. Oh, that's really good. I should put that into practice. The things that you intend to do, there is a disconnect between intention and direction. What if everything you do, when there's something that you're doing, for whatever reason, the default setting to me, and probably because it's super easy for me, it's easy for me to come home, flop down on the couch, pull out my phone, and just let the phone, be my imagination or whatever it is. But what if every time I do that, I would look at it as the sorry move where I land on the square and I slide in a direction that's different than what my intent is. I want to be caring for my family. I want to do those types of things. But what if when I do those, when I make a selfish decision, it's not just this thing, I'm sliding in a direction. Something that I believe, and this is not an original quote to me. Well, I'll get to that in a little bit. But I believe that sometimes we get distracted on our path. So we have a direction that we want to go, or we have a direction that we have gotten on by default, and all of these shiny things that are distracting us on the path, they distract us from the destination that this way takes us. So we're on a way, and we are so enamored by the things that are coming along that way, the fun that we're having on that, that we don't understand that the way that we're going leads us to a destination that we don't want to get. Like, this is so practical for me in my relationship with my family. That my intent doesn't always, there's a disconnect between that and where I end up. So, I ask you this question. How do you know? How do I know that my path isn't leading me where I want to go? Or let's say that my path isn't taking me where I want to go. How do I know? So here's something that's just super practical. Whenever you're going somewhere that you're not sure about, or let's say someone comes and talks to you about something, and your defensiveness goes up. You have there's a defensiveness that goes up. These shiny things, they lower your defenses and they raise your defensiveness. Like they make you vulnerable. You're going down this path and it's shiny, it's new, and it's, man, I want one, or man, I want to watch that. I just want to hit play, or she's so whatever, or he's so whatever. I just have to jump into this. Lowers your defenses and raises your defensiveness. Be aware of the things that you're super defensive about. And one of the things that I believe, and this is where I believe that God has put each one of us in Oasis Church for a reason. I believe God has surrounded you, and the way that He designed the church to work is for there to be people around you who are to say, hey, hang on, did you know that that boat is made of stone and it's not going to float? Or you're actually making decisions that are going to take you to a destination that you don't want to go. That is what the church is to be to each other. That is what I want us to become more to each other. And something that, I just can't bear watching is I can't bear watching people making mistakes. My friend, who you know where it's going to end up. You see people making decisions, and while I can't own their journey, it's painful to watch this slow motion train wreck happen in front of you. I want us to give each other permission to speak into our lives, to actually live that out, to be the kind of church that sees things in other people and doesn't feel super intimidated to go and talk to each other about that. And I know for some of you, the situations that you find yourself in, the place that is that you've ended up at is a destination that you may have never, when you got married, you never wanted to come here. You never wanted to end up at this place. And here's the truth. You use the tools that you've been given. You use the tools that you've been given. I realize that. And some of us have been given some pretty sorry tools. And we don't know what it looks like to model something. But I want to throw this out here. You can start changing that. The tools that you give to your kids don't have to be the same tools that you've been given. You can give tools of relationship, of leaning in when you feel like leaning away. And these things are super intimidating. There's agreements, there's chains that need to be broken around some of these things. But you can start being on purpose about the direction that you're going, because you have to be intentional about the direction that you're going if you want to end up where you want to end up. Few things happen like this. A few times in life does it happen like the story I told you initially, where you just start out and by mistake you end up where you wanted to end up. It doesn't happen that way. Principle of the way. Direction, not intention, determines your destination. The direction that you are going right now is a house that's being built. And if we're building something that's quick and easy and immediate and gives us immediate gratification, it's seldom going to stand a storm. And the guy whose house stood the storm, he wasn't lucky. It wasn't like, oh, wow, things just don't come your way. They come my way, and my house just doesn't have it. It's not luck. It's not fortune that got him that. It's him saying yes to the ways of Jesus and saying, I will build slowly, and I'm willing to look into the future. And that is my challenge for you. In our marriages, in our church, in your relationship with your friends, in your life, as you look at things that don't just give you immediately what you're after, and that may be your prayer life, your time that you spend with Jesus, are you willing to say, I am building something? I understand it's not going to happen immediately. I am learning, I am building. So I want to keep going down this subject, but I want to look a little more next Sunday at what does it look like to become the type of body, the type of family that speaks into each other's life, that sees these things happening and cares enough to step in and be vulnerable and ask each other about it. It's something that us guys, when we looked at our church, we said, we're kind of weak in that. We're kind of weak in honestly being authentic and saying, what are you going through? Or here's some things that I see in your life, and that's an area that we want to grow in. And I believe that if we're going to grow in something, we have to be intentional about it. It's not going to change just by having an intent. You have to put some action points to it. I want to look at putting action points to that. What does it look like? What kind of people do we need to become for us to speak into each other's life, for us to care enough, to care about the destination where we're ending up? Blessings to you guys. I'll see you next Sunday.